Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Welcome to the May episode of the Security Sandbox. I'm your host, Sandeep, with Nozomi Networks. I'm our field CTO. We have a fantastic show for you today. We've got one of our customers who's joined us, going to share some really insightful stories and information. We have Canada's largest airline with us today, founded in 1937. These guys are the 10th largest airline in the world by revenue. They're the 8th largest airline in the world by brand value, with a market cap north of $6 billion and a fleet of more than 400 aircraft. These guys are traded on the Toronto Exchange as well as other global exchanges with major hubs all across Canada. I would like to welcome Air Canada and Richard Szymborski, who is the OT manager there. Richard, welcome. Thank you for joining today.
Welcome. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Awesome. Hope you're doing good today. We've been spending a lot of time together over the last year and a half. Happy to say we've made some tremendous progress. From your perspective, Richard, what would you say your current OT cyber program looks like? What are some key things you've achieved in the last year, and how are they helping your organization in cybersecurity overall?
Yeah, it's been a hell of a journey. We really enjoyed it. So far, we're in the beginning of our journey. When we started about a year ago, our OT team, we really didn't really have an OT team, and we had to build one. We had to assess what we had in our environment, which vendors to look at, which products to look at. So over a year ago, we didn't know what was happening, and then we embarked on this journey. And now we got visibility. We've deployed sensors across Canada and internationally, and we're starting to see assets out there. And we're continuing the progress of our journey within the OT.
Fantastic. Sounds like a lot of moving parts going on. So if we can take a few steps back and go to the beginning, what triggered the start of your OT cybersecurity journey? And in fact, very specifically, how did Bill C-26 in Canada shape your approach to risk management?
Yeah, that was a big one. When Bill C-26 came out, right, which is a legislation here in Canada, basically to bolster cybersecurity, particularly in critical infrastructure, primarily aimed at federally regulated sectors such as energy, telecom, and transportation. So that really triggered it because when this bill was in Parliament, our legal team had to look at it, evaluate, and see the impact to us at Air Canada. So once they did that, it went all the way up to the board, and everyone saw that and said, "Yeah, this is coming down the pipeline, and we need to get ready for it." So that really triggered that OT snowball, and it's been great ever since.
Exciting. Can you walk us through some of the decisions you had to make during the process of launching your OT security program?
Oh, for sure. When we mentioned OT, like we didn't know what OT was here at Air Canada. What does that really represent? What was that at OT? And then how do we build this OT program? Do we insource this? Do we outsource this? How do we build the team? So what we had so many questions. So what we did actually was we went and we got an accounting firm. We went to EY and we asked, provide us an assessment of OT and the roadmap to get us to a maturity level that we want to be. So they came back, they did an assessment for us, and they gave us basically a roadmap. And they defined what OT was here at Air Canada. And we took those building blocks and we had a plan. And there were four main things that we had to look at. Obviously, the first one was building a governance model. We needed to have a way to communicate this with senior leadership and with the team. So the governance model was key to us, and it was one of the things that we started working on right away from day one. And obviously, the other one was the asset discovery. You don't know if you can't protect what you don't know, right? So we had to understand what were all our OT assets out here at Air Canada. Hence, we had a request for proposal to look out on the market to see what's out there technology-wise to get the visibility that we wanted to get for OT. We had to understand our OT architecture, reference architecture. That was another item that was key. And then obviously the last key one that we had to work on right away was an incident response plan. Did we have one for an OT and understand that? So those are the four main areas that we had to focus on. And then we took that and ran with it.
Wow. So the big takeaway I hear from that, Richard, is it takes a lot of effort leading up to even launching a program like this. You have to have half an idea of what your expectations are. So when you follow through and execute on things, you've got a better marker to measure yourself against. So thanks for sharing that with us. That's a lot of insight that people don't often realize. They think that when you want to start a project, you can start it right now, fresh. But in fact, there's a lot of effort that goes into launching a program like that. Thanks, Richard. That was perfect. I got another question for you now. This is a random, spontaneous question, and we're going off topic a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to ask you many times is, if you weren't in cybersecurity today, what do you think you'd be doing?
Oh, uh, I like to work with my hands. I'm a tactical person. Professionally, within cyber, I like to touch the stuff and play with it. I like to do some renovations and repairs. I've done that in the past as a hobby. I'm nothing professionally, obviously. I'm a jack of all trade and master of none. But that's what I think I'd go into.
Awesome. Awesome. So again, you like to work with your hands. You're a very tactile person. That ties perfectly into my next question, which is POV, or proof of value. That's a very hands-on exercise. I know personally from working with your team that it was quite intense, but from your perspective, can you share what you guys learned during that phase, not only about vendor evaluation, but what advice would you give to other folks that are starting a similar selection process?
Do we have enough time? Like, really? Uh,
We do.
Honestly, the POV was really critical. When you go through an RFP, you have so many vendors, you have so many responses, and it's really hard to gauge it, right? So you do the best that you have. And when we did a POV, I actually want to do a POV with several vendors. We were able to come down to a number, but one of my recommendations, obviously, do a POV with as many vendors as you can, 2, 3, 4. I guess 4 would be the max. But you really want to evaluate the vendors because you need to understand how they react and how they work with you. Because not every vendor is the same. Not every vendor understands their product as they should. And we see that right away. We saw that right away in one of our POVs where one of the vendors, we thought would be there, but we just saw that they didn't understand their infrastructure, and they were always way behind compared to the other vendors just setting up the environment for that. So it's a very, very important lesson to learn in your POV. The other one that we did was when we selected our POV, we selected the environments, I call them the harsh environments, where we know that we have our OT infrastructure, critical stuff, right? We put them in our hangars, we put them in our cargo environments because we know that there's a lot of OT out there, and we did them in multiple locations. So we had a POV at 3 locations with our vendors and multiple vendors. So setting that up took some time. So, everybody wants to get it roll out, set it up and test it out. But, we want to make sure that we compare the vendors apple to apple and that we actually put them in an environment that we know was critical for us, and not just in an office where, you put in a sensor there and you won't see anything. So this way we're able to see how the tools work, and we're able to compare apples to apples and make an informed decision. So you get to see how the vendors work out. You get to understand what you as not a consumer, but a client, to say, okay, this is what I need to set up within my environment. You have all the different teams that you need to deal with. And you need to learn that. Like if you don't know that, and if you do, then great. But a lot of times you don't know all the intricacies within your own network and how to get certain things done, or either opening up firewalls or changing routes or talking to the networking team. So that really exposed that, and we were able to build those relationships. So the POV helps you understand what you need to do a full rollout, and you get all the lessons learned that way. So the POV lasted, I think, 3 months. I know some of the vendors weren't too happy about that. They want to be in and out. But I would also recommend that you stretch it as much as you can so that you can get to see it. But at the end of the day, it's not enough a period of time to evaluate the tool and then to make an informed decision to select the candidate, the vendor that you want going forward.
Yeah, very in depth. And again, I can tell you from participating in it firsthand as one of the three vendors, it was intense, and you definitely held us accountable. You didn't leave any room for error, certainly, and it was extremely thorough. Enjoyable process, but frustrating because you really knew what you wanted, and you kept those lane markers very tight for us. And
yeah, like to expedite the stuff, we were racking the sensors ourselves.
yeah,
like we were lucky to go in there, rack it. We had folks that were out there. Obviously, when we did it in production rollout, we had the team and had done it properly. But we wanted to get it out there as quick as possible. But like I said, you need to know your processes, and the POV was a great opportunity to do that and have as many, up to 4 vendors to duke it out.
yep, awesome. We do have a couple of questions coming in, Richard. Going back to something you touched on earlier was that before you even start something like this, you have to understand, what does OT mean to the business? So without divulging too much, can you give us an overview of what are the different environments that you would consider OT at Air Canada?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and each customer, each company has its own definition. So we came up with a definition of what OT was, and based on that definition, we came up basically with 2 verticals. One was on the airplane control systems. So that just obviously we're an airline, so we have aircrafts, and then we have the support systems for the aircraft. So that was one vertical. And then the other vertical was, automation systems for us. So that includes safety, your locks, your door locks, your video cameras. It includes your automation systems like your HVAC, your heating, your ventilation, your fire suppression, systems like that, and also cargo. So those are the main areas that we've defined, and that is what's considered for OT for us.
Awesome. Before we pivot and start talking a little bit about implementation, what are some highlights that you can call out that where you would say, of course, shameless plug here, what was Nozomi great at? Why are we continuing evolving this relationship?
Well, you're really a partner to us, right? And we saw that in the POV. We had a situation where, we wanted to make sure that every vendor was put in the same situation so that we can evaluate apples to apples. We had a location here in Montreal where we couldn't support all the vendors on our switch. We just didn't have enough ports. And we reached out and we said, hey, we have this dilemma, and you guys jumped to the ball and said, hey guys, we have this relationship with Keysight. We could probably get a packet broker out there and get that done. So that was one example that you were like, yeah, hey, let's do this. And this was to benefit everyone, not just yourself, right? This was to ensure that all the vendors were together and doing a proof of concept. So that was one of the things that came out. And then the availability. We were working late hours, setting up some sensors and configuring stuff up like that. So you guys were always present on that. Working, coming. I remember once were flying in from Europe, I believe, late on the Friday night, and we worked over a few hours when you came in. So that was one of the stuff that was really evident during the POV.
Awesome. Thank you. Moving into implementation, right? We've spent a lot of time putting the tool in. Can you tell us a little bit about what does your current deployment look like today, and what have you achieved compared to what you set out to achieve?
Yeah, we're still in the early days. We'll go into that a bit more, but we've deployed, oh, I'd say over 35 sensors across Canada, and we're currently doing one in Europe also. So we've deployed it, and this is like within 4 months, right? We just got on board at the beginning of the year, and we deployed that fairly quickly across Canada. We have the Vantage system. We're just sending all the traffic out to Vantage, and we're consolidating all the data out there, right? So I forget the actual question now, but we've deployed our sensors, about 30 of them. What we're seeing right now, there's a lot of data, right? So there's way too much data right now. And that's one of the things that, lessons learned was when you do deploy this, like with the way we've deployed it, there's several ways of deploying this, right? You could do it off a span port, or that's what we're doing. We're spanning out the traffic, or you could go off a tap, right, and put that in line and get the traffic out there. So we were just spanning all the traffic and just consuming everything, and we realized that we didn't know our environment, or I didn't know the environment as well as I thought, and we were seeing stuff that we shouldn't be seeing. So we had to filter some of that traffic out. So one of the lessons learned is before you start implementing that, really understand your network and what data you want to see. Because we said, let's see everything, and you don't want to see everything. As an example, we don't want to see the DMZ, because you're going to be seeing tons of stuff hitting your DMZ, which is normal, and it doesn't hit the OT environment for us. So eliminate that up front so that you don't need to rework that later on.
Awesome. In terms of major objectives, things like compliance, visibility, risk management, I know those were three of the things that were key objectives and criteria. How would you say that has evolved since putting the tool in?
So we definitely have the visibility. We're not where we want to be yet. We still need to integrate that within our CMDB, our centralized database, to get that information out there. But we are seeing the assets out there, which we want to do. So check mark on that. We still need to do some more integrations within the visibility. We're also need to identify our crown jewels, our critical OT assets, right? So if this asset goes down, it impacts, our customers. We need to make sure that we identify these crown jewels and assess their risk, right? So we're in the process of building that methodology to understand, okay, what type of risk do we have? Is this an Air Canada risk? Is it a third-party risk? And how do we mitigate these risks? So we're in early days on that, but that's like the next step. Once we have this inventory and all the complemented data that we have on it to assess the risk, and then we'll be able to see how we can put compensating controls to mitigate any vulnerabilities that we have out there.
That makes sense. Super. I'm going to hit one more quick question here, Richard, and I think I have the answer to this one. Question is, what types of timing challenges do OT security projects face with limited POC evaluation time? Interesting question. I would think preparedness. Know what you need to have tested ahead of time going into it. We see this time and time again. People that want to do a POC or a POV that don't really have any success criteria predefined, it turns into a bit of a science experiment. And we end up all over the place, and it's a huge waste of time for everyone. So I think with the limited time and resources that folks have today, the number one recommendation I can make is do your research, understand your success criteria, understand what the business needs to see up front, so that when you do start evaluating, you hit the ground running and there's no time wasted. Anything to add to
Yeah.
that, Richard?
Yeah, no, I agree, but it's easier said than done, because I was there, and it's really hard, to say, okay, like what's but I know we lost a lot of time on actual configuration, not with all our vendors, but it took longer than expected, and it was just the regular churn of getting changes approved and actually
Hmm.
implemented, right? Like if you miss one port, if you don't do your due diligence and you don't give them the correct information, now you've lost 2 weeks. Well, in our time, let's say about 2 weeks, because by the time you enter that change into the system, by the time it gets approved, by the time you can get a resource assigned to get that change implemented, you've lost 2 weeks. So imagine you think you got everything, and now you have to go back again, and you just lost another 2 weeks. So now just implementing a bloody sensor may take a month longer than expected because of one firewall rule that wasn't properly defined. So that's something that we need to know in our environment, what needs to get open properly, but obviously whatever the vendor needs to tell us needs to be provided. And surprisingly, not all the vendors know what needs to be opened up to get things up and running, and that's a true thing. You know what I mean? Which was a bit surprising for us, but yes, the configuration took a lot longer than we expected, but that's one thing. If you can like know your stuff, know your network, get that done earlier, that would be the first thing to get out there. And then the requirements, we had a whole bunch of requirements set up, evaluated. It's hard to evaluate a vendor based on just those requirements, because each vendor, says, yeah, we can do it. Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, but there's always a question mark or a caveat. They can do part of it or not. And it's hard to see that on a spreadsheet. You do see it actually during the POV. So you have to go through those requirements and then evaluate which ones are important for you. That's one of the things when we did the evaluations, which are critical, which are nice to have. Understand that, so that will help your evaluation, and then focus on those requirements within the POV. So I think those are the things I would recommend folks doing.
Very helpful, Richard. Very helpful. Thank you. And along that thread of requirements, I'm sure different requirements came in from different parts of the business and different stakeholders. Another question we're being asked here is, how were you able to get your business stakeholders on board with the multiple business units that you seem to be touching and impacting?
Yeah. So yeah, we didn't talk about that. So before we actually did the RFP, we did things backwards a little bit. So prior to that, we were focusing on our control framework, and we want to identify, what metrics we need to follow up on this. And I was always scratching my head, and I said, why are we doing this right now? Because I don't know my OT environment, but based on that assessment that we had that was done, we were able to identify the different areas of OT, and then we were able to go down to the business. And we actually had already contacts provided for that. So when I joined, that was already done. So what we did is then we went out and started to build those relationships with that. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention was that is, I think, the most important is to build these relationships, not just with the business, but build it with your network team. I've heard of a situation where, a customer selected a vendor to do an OT deployment. They selected, they bought it, and they wanted to implement it, and they got delayed several months because the network team wasn't aware. They couldn't deploy this because nothing was available to deploy it on, right? So it just gave them a backlog, and they couldn't get anything done. So the communication to build that relationship before you do anything, by all means, is key to everything. Luckily, we had that prior to doing the POV, so we had the names. We met with them because we had to go over the different KPIs and the controls and stuff like that. So they knew us, and we knew that if we had to build that relationship. So we went to our facilities managers, we went to our cargo managers, we went to our aircraft support system maintenance folks, and we built that. So once we had that, when we did the RFP and we saw data, it was easy for us to go talk to the folks and ask them questions and say, what is this, and stuff like that. So that is very key, guys. Like if you learn anything, reach out to your folks, whether it's business, whether it's on the cyber side, because you need help from them down the road, your networking folks, talk to them. Your risk folks, your GRC folks, have those contacts and build those relationships with them for sure.
Awesome. Super, super answer. And again, as you're listing off those different business groups, those are all consumers of the data that this platform is providing today. So it's providing multiple use cases across the organization, proving to have a little bit of value above and beyond just being a siloed piece of equipment. Awesome. Thank you, Richard. Several times you've mentioned to me that technology was the easy part here, right? What were some of the cultural or organizational shifts that needed to happen at Air Canada to make this program successful? I think that's important to talk about.
Yeah, and I think we spoke a bit about it. One of the things that we were lucky, we had senior leadership involvement from day one, right? So this whole initiative started because of Bill C-26. The leadership understood that this is coming down, and they were on board right away. So that was something that we had. And we knew that we needed that, right? I mentioned earlier, one of the things, or the first thing that we needed to do was an operating model, a governance model. How do we run this OT cybersecurity program? And we had the buy-in from senior leadership. And once you have that buy-in, then the message gets trickled down to the different teams and the folks on the floor, the folks that you're going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So that helped us out enormously. So we got the buy-in from senior leadership, and it was funny. Once we had our first senior leadership meeting, we showed the results and we showed things, and you just saw the reaction of the folks on the call. Oh, really? Why do we have that up there? And then we started having those discussions. So that was great. The other thing was we had a small team, but we have an environment where they can grow and learn and not worry about if they make any mistakes, and learn from what they're doing out there. So that environment I think helped us grow. And you know them, Sandeep, you got to see them. They came in, they learned, and then they started growing, and you can see the maturity on them, which was great to see. So have a great environment for this, and you'll get more back from that, definitely.
Super, super. Another great question just came in, and I can answer part of it, but I'd love to hear from you as well, the rest of it. So the question is, how are you acting on alerts? From my experience, that's the hardest part. Who are you going to inform, and what do you do for following up on alerts?
Yeah.
So for me, I think one of the biggest things, and you're living through this right now, Richard, is you have to go through some basic alert tuning. It's a one-time exercise to just set up and train the platform to understand what the alert modeling looks like. But once we do some basic alert tuning, the tool is extremely efficient and lean. And of course, things like Vantage IQ streamline that, help you minimize things like analyst fatigue. Vantage IQ prioritizes your alerts and helps you understand where to start. In terms of Air Canada, what does your alert workflow look like? Who gets notified? What does that process look like?
Yeah, like I said, we're still in early days, so we're starting to build that. So the way we have it right now, and we haven't looked at Alert IQ yet. That's something that maybe we'll be looking at down the road, but right now we haven't looked at that yet. Right now, we're in the process of doing a triage and eliminating the assets that we don't need because we're generating a lot of noise, right? So that's where we're focusing on. So hopefully by the end of Q2, well, in the coming weeks, we should be down to a point where we've eliminated all that noise from there. And then we're going to be taking whatever Nozomi gives us as an alert or a risk. We're actually going to be sending that to our CTI team. So currently, our CTI team looks at the risk and reprioritizes it based on different contextual data, additional context that they have that currently we may not see within Nozomi. So we get that, and we have like a calculator that either will raise the risk or reduce it. So we're in the process of integrating into that process. It's an existing process here that we have. So we're just going to have a calculator to reassess the risk, and then we'll work on that. We are leveraging our existing CSOC team. Well, that's the plan. They're not involved in this right now yet because we're still building this. But the goal is to have the CSOC team look at that. We have a great CSOC team currently, and we would like to leverage them. But like you mentioned, you do have the module, the IQ module that we might be looking at and to see if we can integrate that. So that's still new to it's still we haven't decided on which way we're going, but initially we're just going to send it to the CTI team, reassess it, and then send it to our CSOC team. But we'll look at the different modules and see if we can leverage that to help, like you mentioned, the analyst fatigue.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Richard. And that's a good reminder that this journey is very much an evolution, and it's crawl, walk, run, right? You can't do one until you've done the previous step. So I would say we're still, like you stated, we're still in the early phases of the implementation, but as that maturity comes, I believe these are things that naturally will get taken advantage of because it makes sense.
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
we'll be closing this chapter soon. We'll be going into the run
Agreed.
phase, I think, within Q3. So in the next couple of weeks, I think we'll be able to transition to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Almost done, Richard. Fantastic. Again, really appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. I'm going to go for one more fun question. If you could meet any celebrity out there, who would you want to meet?
Honestly, I don't have any celebrities that well, growing up, I was a great Harrison Ford. I loved Harrison Ford and everything he
Oh,
did.
yeah.
So, I guess I would go with Harrison Ford, but yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Who wouldn't want to meet Han Solo and Indiana Jones and
Yeah.
so many more?
Yeah. I'm dating
Awesome.
myself here, I guess. I don't know.
Everybody loves Harrison Ford. Awesome. All right. So now that you've built or are building a strong asset inventory and visibility foundation, what would you say are your next steps on the OT risk management journey?
Yeah, so we still in the process of filtering the noise, right? We're eliminating assets that we don't need, but we need to enrich the data. So right now we are seeing the assets. Um, you know, as an example, we spoke about it earlier last week. Was we see what we call a portable maintenance access terminal, a PMAT device. So it's currently being flagged as an IT asset, but it's actually a tablet that the maintenance folk use to load software on a plane. So we're going to get more contextual data for that, and that will be either through smart polling or I think we'll be able to do an ARC agent on that, but we'll see to get more contextual data so that we can properly identify those traffic. And then also on the assets, we want to be able to complement the asset owner. Who do we need to talk to when there is an issue that we need to address? And that assess the risk type. Is this an asset that is an AC risk or is it a third-party risk? As an example, a plane, there's not much I can do on a plane. I have to go back to the OEM and negotiate and talk to them to address the risks.
Interesting. All right. And I think my final question for you, Richard, in summary, based on everything we've talked about, everything we've gone through for the last year and a bit with you and the team, with the building of the partnership, any tips or lessons learned that would make someone else's journey go a lot smoother?
Yeah, we spoke a bit about it, is building those relationships, right, with the asset owners, with the networking team, with the system integrators, with the cyber team, with the GRC team. Really get to know your folks so that when you do, when you're in a situation that you're deploying and all that, you facilitate that. Because that's one of the things that we noticed that if we would have been able to improve that a little bit, we would have saved some time there. Also, know your environments, right? Once you deploy the sensor, okay, great. What do you do with that, right? You need to start, creating your sites, creating your locations, how do you want to handle all that? If, if I would go back, usually after a POV, and the time you sign a contract, there's a bit of a lull, right? Like you've done all the heavy lifting, the POV, and then it's off to legal and strategic procurement to sign the contract and all that, which may take weeks, months to get that done. During that time, get to know your environment, get to know your zones, like your network. What kind of network do you have? Do you have a flat network? Do you understand the architecture of that? Because once you deploy the sensors, you need to populate all that within the sensors. So if you don't do it now or during that time, when you've deployed it, it's going to take some time, right? So now we're in the process of taking a bit more time to look configuring the data within within the tool. And when you do that, you're just wasting some time, because the key thing is for us is to keep the engagement of our senior leadership. They're engaged right now, but you just can't be saying the same thing. Oh, I'm deploying, I'm seeing more assets. You need to get to the next level. Okay, I've identified this asset. I've identified the risk or not risk, and we have some compensating controls. You need to build that story. And if you get stuck too long on the same chapter, you'll lose their attention. So we're always trying to get to the next phase to say, okay, now this is what we're seeing. This is part of the journey. This is what we want to see to keep that engagement from with the senior leadership.
Fantastic advice. Fantastic advice and lots of lessons learned. I'm sure. Richard, thank you so much for joining today. Again, folks, Richard Szymborski, OT Manager for Air Canada. Wishing you a wonderful rest of your day, Richard. Obviously, I will be talking to you again soon. And thank you for joining us, everyone. See you next month.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.